This is not a religious story, not a sermon, not a lesson, not an esoteric fantasy. This is the story of a man who once stepped beyond what we call life and came back with answers. His name was Edgar Cayce, and he saw what many of us only sense in the stillness of the night, when everything external disappears, and only one question remains. What happens next? Edgar Cayce was not a mystic in the traditional sense. He did not seek fame, did not create a sect, and did not promise salvation. He was a simple American from Kentucky, a guy with a quiet voice and deep eyes. But one day, something happened to him that changed his destiny, and, perhaps, will change yours. He called it entering a state of sleep. But those who listened to his predictions understood that it was much deeper. In these states, he left his body, not imaginarily, not in meditation, but for real. His body remained lying down, and his consciousness went away. He explained it this way. First, I hear a ringing sound, then a light, and everything disappears. I don't feel my body. I don't hear time. I just am. And then came the strangest part. He saw, not with his eyes, but more clearly than he ever had in his normal life. What exactly did he see? He said, "The soul leaves the body softly, without pain or fear, as if you were just taking off a heavy coat. At first it's unusual, then it becomes easy." He recalled watching himself in a trance, seeing the room from above, the people around him asking questions, and then everything disappeared. Finding himself in an unusual space with no ceiling, no floor, no walls, he called it a sphere of light. There were no sounds, but he felt that he knew everything he needed to know. Thoughts did not come in the form of words, but were instantaneous comprehension. There were other beings, consciousnesses, souls, present in this light. He could not name them, but he felt their recognition and knew that they recognized him too. There were no words, only feelings and memory. He noted that he saw the soul undergo a kind of review, not a judgment or punishment, but a memory, like a film. And in this film, you feel not only yourself, but everyone you have ever touched, with a word, an action, or a silence. Then comes the understanding of who you really are. This is only the beginning. And if you are reading this, it means that you are ready to learn more. After one of his out-of-body experiences, Edgar Cayce could not immediately come to his senses. He said that he felt awakening not from a dream, but from another reality, clearer and deeper than ours. It seemed that he was returning not to the world, but only to a shell and limitation. He often repeated, "Real life is not here. We are only guests, wanderers, and students." This thought was not just a beautiful metaphor, because during his trance states, he did not simply leave the body. He saw what awaits us next. He described worlds similar to cities of light, with levels and layers. Some of them were calm, like a quiet evening lake. Others were seething, like a continuous stream of change. Each soul ended up where it was supposed to be. According to vibrations, the soul belongs to its inner light. You do not go to heaven or hell. You just find yourself where you have always been, without a mask and without a name. Cayce honestly said that the soul does not carry actions, but their essence, not external deeds, but intentions. If a person lived in a lie, he feels it as a burden, and if in love, as the ease of flight. The most important thing is that this is not a sentence, but an invitation to development, to awareness and return. He told how he saw souls who chose to return to be born again, to experience pain, joy, fear, faith, not because of coercion, but by an inner call, a desire to become better, deeper, and brighter. After leaving his body, Edgar watched the soul preparing to incarnate. It was not like a movie, but more like a symphony, a huge flow of energy, light, and meaning merging into a single point, creating a human being. He understood that we are not accidents. None of us are mistakes. We are a choice. We come here because there is something inside us that can only be revealed on earth. This is where the most important thing begins. There was no ostentatious drama in these revelations. Cayce did not force people to believe. He called them to remember. People listened not with their ears, but with their hearts, because he did not teach, but reminded. Sometimes after such experiences he cried, not from fear, but from the feeling of contact with something so real that it makes our life meaningful. It seemed like a dream, and he acknowledged that the hardest part was yet to come. The hardest part was not the leaving itself, but the return and living as if you knew nothing, although in fact you understood everything. He said, if people remembered who they really were, they would no longer be afraid of leaving, because death is not the end, but the beginning of a completely different stage, much more real than this one. Now the question is, do you want to know what he saw next? Once, during one of his deep trances, Edgar Cayce saw not just the afterlife, but the very moment of transition when the soul leaves the body. He described it not as a sudden movement or a break, but as a release, as if he had been holding his breath for a long time and then finally exhaled. At that moment, everything changes. You are no longer in the body, but you continue to exist. You are aware of yourself. You feel and perceive the world much more clearly, without distortion and pain. He said, at first you see yourself, your body, the people around you, and all this seems somehow distant, alien, as if it no longer belongs to you. Then it is as if the light calls you, but it is not a blinding light, but a warm, gentle one. It does not blind, but beckons with its calmness. Edgar said that the soul is met not by angels or relatives, but by creatures without form that cannot be described in words. But their presence is felt as love that does not require proof. It simply is. It is a state of recognition, as if you are returning to a place where you have always been, but simply forgot about it. Cayce emphasized that this is an extraordinary experience, changing the idea of life and death radically. Edgar describes the afterlife not as a judgment, but as a moment of truth. Instead of seeing events, you experience the emotions you caused in others. Everything you sent out into the world returns to you. If you caused pain, you experience it not as punishment, but as a lesson in empathy. If you loved, you feel that love again, but in a purer, more intense form. He calls it a mirror, not a sentence, where you ultimately ask yourself, have I become the person I wanted to be? He also mentions that some souls get stuck in an intermediate grey light due to earthly attachments. In this state, there's no fear, but also no peace. It's like a corridor without doors, until they make a conscious decision to move on. Then something even more astonishing happened. He spoke of stages and places where the soul goes, not based on wealth or position, but on the light it has accumulated, purity of intention, and the ability to love even when it hurts. Each of these states is not a location, but a vibration, a state of being. You don't go up, you remember who you are, and through that, you become yourself, Cayce explained. At such moments, his voice would become especially quiet, as if he wanted to share the most important things, frankly, to say something that was better left unsaid, but he did it anyway. Edgar said that there is a silence beyond these levels, but it is not empty. It is like the breath of the universe. There are no forms, no names, no memory of who you were. There is only essence, only the soul in its original light. Cayce admitted that it is difficult to convey in words. It is like returning to the source of all life, to a place where you and God are not separate, but one. To reach this state, one must learn to let go, and this is not always easy. Even after death, a person holds on to grievances, desires, and his or her self-image. Each such burden is like a weight that prevents the soul from rising. Edgar observed how some souls wandered because they could not forgive themselves or others, and some were afraid of being forgotten, as if their life had no meaning. Then the entity's helpers appeared, who did not save, but only reminded. You are more than you think, and you are not alone. Sometimes, Cayce said, souls see future incarnations not as punishment, but as an opportunity. Not immediately, but only what they are able to accept. With this knowledge comes a choice, to return or to stay. And here's what's amazing. Many souls want to return, despite all the suffering of earthly life. There, on the other side, they suddenly realize that life is not torture, but a chance, an opportunity to love, to grow, and to remember. The soul does not return to suffer. He came back to be himself. He said what he saw. Souls choose their future lives. They choose their parents, their country, their time, even their trials. But they do it not as victims, but as creators, showing faith in themselves. This was Cayce's greatest discovery. We are not accidental. Our pain is not accidental. Our meetings are not accidental. Everything that happens to us reflects what we came with, what we wanted to experience, what we decided to remember. You are not just a body in search of meaning, but meaning that has come to the body. Sometimes he spoke in riddles, as if he could not reveal everything, as if he knew that not everyone was ready for it. But there was something in these words that touched the heart. For example, the truth is not in what happens after death, but in what you do while you live. Or, there is no death. There is only a change of rooms. The hardest thing is not to die. The hardest thing is to remain yourself. Then there was a feeling that he saw not only the afterlife, but also a map of the soul, with roads, crossroads, places where we forget ourselves, and those where we finally remember. Cayce once said, "The greatest pain of the soul is not the loss of the body, but the forgetting of one's nature." He claimed that most people live as if in a dream, because they are afraid of what they will see when they wake up. But waking up is the true meaning of incarnation. During one of his trances, he described a scene that still gives goosebumps to those who hear it. Edgar said he saw the soul of a man who had just left his body standing before him. It was not a being, but a kind of field of consciousness. Not a judge or a face, but simply an entity. You are facing yourself, he said. Not the one you were, but the one you could be. There is a distance between the two versions, and everything you have experienced in life, pain, fear, loneliness, is your resistance to the real you. He claimed that the soul sees everything at once, every action, every thought. But the main thing is not what is done, but where it came from, fear or love. The world on the other side is a mirror, and it asks only one question: have you lived with an open heart? Despite the fact that many called him a prophet, Edgar always rejected this. I am not a prophet, he said. I just remember a little more, and therefore must share. He was not interested in religious dogmas and sects. He spoke simply. Be the light, even if there is darkness around. In one of his notes, he described an unusual case when he worked with a woman whose husband had suddenly died. She was in despair. Cayce closed his eyes, went into a trance, and suddenly said, "He has not left. He is nearby. He is watching and asking you, do not be sad. Do not hide from life." He emphasized, I did not die. I just went a little forward. After this conversation, the woman cried not from pain, but from the feeling that she was heard, that there was something greater nearby than she could imagine. Cayce claimed, the soul is never lost, even if we leave out of fear. We remain confused, but the light invariably finds its spark. Because each person comes to this world not by chance, but to answer an ancient request. Edgar also described the so-called intermediate corridor, a state between lives where the soul is purified, letting go of what it failed to understand, and makes a decision to move on or return. This choice is not punishment, it is trust. The universe does not condemn, it offers, and the soul agrees because it feels that the path is not yet complete. In one of the last trances, Cayce said, I saw a soul returning to the light, and it cried not from pain, but from the realization of how much it underestimated itself in life and how deeply it was loved all this time. Edgar Cayce said that after coming out of a trance, he would often go into long silences, not because he didn't know what to say, but because words seemed too limited for what he had seen. Some things, he admitted, could only be conveyed through silence, only to those who remembered deep down. He once said an unusual phrase, you don't have to be perfect, you have to be real. And these words captured the essence of his experiences. In his opinion, there are no scales or meters with notebooks beyond death. There is only you, without masks, fears, and protection. And the most important question that will be asked is, have you become yourself? He said that souls often return to the body not because of punishment, but because of love, because they want to complete something important, to understand, to forgive, to love. Every difficulty or pain in life is not a punishment, but a reminder that you have turned away from yourself. It is time to return. Cayce left behind thousands of notes, but the main thing was not in them. The most important thing was the attitude with which he lived. He believed that everything that happens to us is part of a great awakening, and everyone, even the most lost person, will sooner or later hear this call not from the outside, but from within. He often said, "Don't believe me. Ask yourself. Close your eyes. Listen. Where thoughts end and memory begins. The memory of who you are." Chapter 20. Perhaps that is why you are reading or listening to these words now. Because somewhere deep inside, you already knows. Somewhere in your soul there is music that Cayce called the voice of the soul. He claimed that each of us has an invitation, a moment when reality begins to crack at the seams, and light breaks through the crack. All that is required of us is not to run away, but to stop and say, "I hear." If you have read this far, perhaps this is your moment. It is not a coincidence. It is a sign that you are already going home. If while reading these lines you felt something inside, even barely perceptible, do not leave it unanswered. Write in the comments whether you heard this call, or just leave a mark. Silence. I am here so that those who go further know that they are not alone. If you want to continue on this path, leave a like. It is not just a button, but a sign, quiet but sincere, like an echo of your soul, finally heard by someone. Share this video with someone who may have also forgotten and is now ready to remember. See you there, where words end and the present begins.